Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show where I dig up often forgotten theme decks and try to make them a wee bit better. This week, we've got a rough one. The Lightning Loop theme deck came out in Unbroken Bonds, if I remember correctly, alongside the Battle Mind theme deck that we upgraded recently, link in the description. But it is definitely the worst of the pair. Like, even looking at the deck list on the back, it's really uninspired compared to what the Mewtwo deck offered, and it's not actually offering much. But, obviously to understand what's up with this less than impressive set of cards, we need to crack it open and see what's inside. Okay guys, I thought I would do something a little different than just shuffling through the deck. I thought it would be fun to kind of look at the key pieces and walk through the strategy as it's laid out in the theme deck. So starting off, you've got your box legendary here in Zeraora. It's got one attack for a lightning energy that does 20 and discards a special energy from the opponent's active, which is actually becoming more relevant as we kind of have a full suite of type-specific special energies as of Vivid Voltage. But what we're really here for is Discharge. So Discharge for 1 lightning and 2 colorless allows you to discard all lightning energy from this Pokemon, and the attack does 50 damage for every energy you discarded in that way. This is basically the electric type Baby Blacephalon. The only difference being that you're discarding from the active as opposed to discarding from the hand with Baby Blacephalon. Now, because you don't have access to Welder and anything like that, the way you accelerate that energy onto Zeraora is with this Magnezone. So this Magnezone has the Magnetic Circuit ability, which basically says as often as you like during your turn, you can attach lightning energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. There's no qualifier for something being on the bench or in the active, so you can spread it around wherever you like, which is great, but it's also not great in the fact that this is a stage 2 Pokemon, which means you're gonna need a bit of setup to get this thing rolling. Now, the final key piece is Fisherman. Like I mentioned, you don't have access to something like Welder in the Lightning archetype, so this is the best you can do to sort of get your combo off every turn. Fisherman plainly allows you to put 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile back into your hand. So the idea is turn after turn, you're using Zeraora's attack, discarding a bunch of lightning energy, you use this to get it back and then reattach with Magnezone. Now, honestly, I didn't really want to cover this deck because just, looking at the box on the back, I knew there wasn't really much here to work with. And as I mentioned before, I was a little iffy about doing anything that wasn't mostly in the standard format because you have a lot more cards to replace. Obviously, the Magneton here has rotated, so I am going to, for you guys, attempt to upgrade this deck and take it into Expanded and see if with the broader access to tools, interesting, cards there, hopefully I can make something that will take at least a win or two in a format full of degenerate monster decks. So yeah, let me go away for a little bit and figure out what I can do to make this somewhat playable. Well, we have a deck. Does it work? Kind of. Now, admittedly, this is my first foray into Expanded in earnest, so I've made do with what tools were available to me, basically whatever I had kicking around my PTCGO account. Also, this deck's needs don't actually leave you a lot of room for interesting choices. You're basically at the mercy of the Zeraora Magnezone Fisherman combo, which means that roughly 1/3 of the deck is kind of spoken for already. But I did say I would try and make it work, and after a lot of very painful testing, this is the list I arrived at. It's serviceable, which is about the best I can ask for. So starting off, we have, of course, Zeraora. This is one of our 2 big damage dealers, and it's the one we're trying to turbo out. You already know what it does from the opening earlier, so I won't dwell on it too long. Attach a lot of lightning energy, discard it, things go boom. Next up, I added in Zeraora GX because I never really got to enjoy it in my sealed only series, link in the description, and it just so happens to have some applicable synergy here. So its ability gives our electric Pokemon free retreat as long as they have a lightning energy attached, which is pretty useful. And it can also hit for 160 for 3 energies, which is pretty solid. But most importantly, it has a very relevant GX attack. For 1 lightning energy, Full Voltage GX allows us to attach up to 5 lightning energy from the discard pile to our Pokemon in any way we like. That might mean setting up one big baby Zeraora, or a few, or priming a Boltund in a desperate situation. Speaking of Boltund, we've got 2 copies of Boltund V, honestly because I couldn't afford to get a 3rd or 4th for the life of me. At least not on PTCGO. It's going for like 15 packs or whatever. It's a little nuts. Anyway, this is your alternate win condition, and if I'm honest, you should prioritize this over Zeraora. Electrify is here to get some lightning energy on board pretty early on, and Bolt Storm deals 10 damage plus 30 more for every lightning energy in play. So if you combo this with Magnezone, you can very quickly make Boltund a major threat, especially since it doesn't require that it have all the energies concentrated on itself. Now, for the Magnezone line, I've gone with a 4-0-3 split. There's just no room for anything else, certainly not for the Magneton, and I felt that this was the bare minimum to ensure that I got one out in the first few turns. Now, as you already know, its ability is basically Frostmoths for electric Pokemon, but without the annoying bench restriction, which is important because sometimes you just have to get an attacker going right away. Tapu Koko Prism Star is an auto-include in every lightning deck, if we're being honest, allowing you to quickly accelerate 2 energies to 2 Pokemon by sending it to the Lost Zone. And I should say specifically, you get 2 energies, 1 goes to one Pokemon, 1 goes to the other. Now, that means that in this deck, it can't charge up a single baby Zeraora, so it should kind of be saved for when you're going wide and spreading your energy around, or if you're making a pivot to Boltund as your main attacker. We've got a small Jirachi escape board package, mostly to help with hitting Fisherman and rare candies at the right time, and give us some ability to pivot since we couldn't even find room for a single switch in the deck. But then we also have Zeraora GX to at least give our lightning Pokemon a bit of mobility. Finally, Dedenne and Oricorio are there to help us draw cards. Both are a staple in regular Baby Blacephalon decks, so I figured both would work here too. Same principle. As for our trainer cards, the lineup is pretty strict, to be honest. Cynthia and Professor's Research are the way to go here. Cynthia is a must because it lets us save rare candies and potentially draw them back, while Research is just the faster, more aggressive draw supporter. 3 Fisherman for energy recovery is a must. I did test the playset of 4, but they're just too bricky in the early game, so 3 is going to have to be enough, but you also have access to a pal pad in this deck, which means that in theory, instead of playing 3, you're sort of playing 5, so, you know, it works. I've also added in a single Guzma because it is basically the boss's orders of Expanded and has some interesting synergy with Jirachi and Zeraora GX, allowing you to gust up a target on the bench and bring up one of your own, hopefully to take the KO. Energy Retrieval and Training Court give us a bit more energy recovery in a pinch, as does Ordinary Rod. But you need to carefully assess how much energy you need in order to take a specific KO and use these at the right time. And Energy Retrieval, Fisherman, and Training Court comboed together essentially represent 350 damage from Zeraora, so yeah, keep that in mind. Manage your resources. Nest Ball is our main searcher. It helps us swarm the field with Magnemite and Jirachi early in the game, or, you know, grab a Zeraora or Boltund in a pinch. In the expanded format, I'd argue it's better than Quick Ball because you don't have to discard to get your basic, right? The only thing is that it does go directly to the bench, so no grabbing something and sending it back with Pokegom, none of those shenanigans. Evolution Incense is there to grab Magnezone and literally nothing else. This was a couple Ultra Balls for a while, but, you know, it got to the point where I realized I can't afford to toss most of these resources anyways, and when you need the Magnezone, you know what you're going for, so Evo Incense made, you know, the most sense. Now, you only ever want to use this when you have a Magnemite or a rare candy at the ready, because obviously Marnie is a thing and you're kind of telegraphing what you're doing, but N also exists as a supporter in this format, which is similar to Marnie in that it can very much frustrate your attempts to put your hand together. So, you know, save this for the right moment when you're ready to evolve. And finally, Thunder Mountain is there, but maybe not for the reason you think. Zeraora discards all the lightning energy from it when it attacks, which can kind of be overkill if you need to KO smaller Pokemon. So this actually lets you deal a quick 100 damage instead of overcommitting 3 energies, you know, when you're knocking out a tiny target. It also lets you use Boltund's Electrify or Zeraora GX's Full Voltage for free, which, yeah, is kind of helpful in a pinch. Oh, and obviously we have lots of lightning energy because Zeraora is a very hungry kitty, and just like Baby Blounds, this deck does not work if you do not have a ton of energy in play. So that wraps it up for the deck profile. To be honest, it's just barely functional, but hey, that's not too bad considering what we had to work with. Now, let's jump on over to PTCGO's expanded ladder for the first time and see if we can try and scrape a couple wins together. Okay, and diving into our first ever game of expanded on the channel, we run right up against a Firebox deck. Now, things get off to a pretty slow start with my opponent leading a Ninetales V against my Magnemite. I don't open particularly well, which is a problem because fire decks have means to quickly accelerate energy and deal massive damage, and I'm sure in Expanded, that speed is not limited to Welder. Now that I think about it, I don't know what else people have access to, but I'm sure it's busted and disgusting and totally unfair. Fortunately enough, my opponent doesn't seem to have much energy acceleration in the early game, which means that I've got to make the most of the early turns to try and get my own engine set up. Now, as long as I'm careful about what I bench, I can theoretically get ahead in the prize race by trading Zeraora and other 1-prizers for my opponent's big V and potentially GX Pokemon. But if my opponent has means to take out my Magnemites before I can evolve them up, then yeah, my goose is cooked. Things are pretty dire early on, with my opponent using Blacksmith to charge up their Ninetales, and then attach a fancy new, or I guess technically old, special energy that gets around the fact that fire Pokemon like to discard energy when using big attacks. This special energy in particular just reattaches itself to the Pokemon after it's discarded, which is kind of busted. Now, with the ability to smash me for 180 damage turn after turn without cost, my opponent's Ninetales is suddenly an existential threat, and it's not a threat that I can out without significant investment on a Zeraora, or a lucky draw into Boltund and a ton of energy. Now, the timely arrival of both Rare Candy and Thunder Mountain allows me to get the game back in my court, allowing Zeraora GX to take a very cheeky KO against Ninetales with Plasma Fists. That done, I pivot into Boltund because it's the much more reliable attacker, let's be honest, and with Fisherman nowhere to be seen, I'm able to take a KO on Togekiss V, but my opponent very quickly dashes my dreams of a Boltund sweep by bringing out Charizard and annihilating my doggo with a timely Fire Spin. At this point, I'm forced to take desperate measures and bank on Zeraora GX's GX attack to charge up a baby Zeraora on the bench and hopefully KO the Charizard. But if I whiff energy or my opponent goes VMAX, then this game is kind of over. Luckily, my opponent prioritizes taking 2 prizes over tackling the threat on my bench, and they happen not to have the VMAX, so I'm able to bring in my baby Zeraora and take the revenge KO, blowing up Charizard V for the win. And right on into game 2, and it's yet another fire deck. This one squarely in the category of Charizard and friends. Just like in the first game, it's a very slow start with me desperately trying to set up my Magnezone engine in order to power up my attackers. But man, I'm gonna tell you, this deck is just slow sometimes. And as with the first game then, I have to count on the fact that my opponent will leave a big target on the field that I can hopefully blow up to, even up the prize race. Now, my opponent initially led Charizard V, which is scary enough because it can OHKO pretty much everything in the deck, but instead they pivot out to Charizard and Braixen Tag Team GX, which is something of a nightmare in its own for this deck, more so maybe than even a Reshiram or Charizard GX. Why? because Charizard and Braixen searches for 3 cards when attacking, and I have 0 hand disruption in this deck. There was just no room for it. So basically, if this thing starts steamrolling me, my opponent can set up their next few turns at their leisure, which can spell doom for me, obviously, without a way to very quickly get back into the game. And unfortunately, this deck just can't set up that quickly, so Charizard and Braixen do indeed steamroll my Pokemon, racking up 2 very easy prizes for my opponent and ballooning their hand to almost comical levels. You almost wish you had a reset stamp, and then you remember that it's banned and expanded because degeneracy is not the exception, it's the law in this format. But all jokes aside, I'm in a grim situation, and if my opponent can take 1 more KO, then it's not likely that I can come back and win. So I take a risk, dumping a ton of energy and resources with Dedenne GX in an attempt to see enough pieces to eventually pull off the Zeraora combo. And the gods of the TCG universe must have smiled on me, because I get just enough on the next turn to charge up a Zeraora and dish out 300 damage, taking a clean KO on the tag team. Now, I'm the one ahead in the prize race, and my opponent needs to answer my Zeraora quickly, which is entirely likely because they have a hand probably bigger than my deck at this point, so I'm pretty sure they got options. And my opponent does in fact have options in the form of a Sandaconda V, which comes in, but then oddly doesn't go for the big attack to take the KO. I still, even now, don't know why my opponent didn't take the KO. Because they were basically giving me the green light to charge up my Zeraora and blow up the snake, which I did. So with me only needing to take 1 prize now, my opponent started building up a Victini V, I think in the hopes of sweeping my pretty frail team, and it's a good bet too because Victini's main attack scales with the amount of energy attached, so it sort of makes sense in a way, although if I've built up the Zeraora, it's probably already too late. But hey, for me, a timely Guzma brings up the bench Charizard V, and while I can't quite KO that, I've wounded it enough that now if it goes VMAX, I can probably hit the numbers I need to take a KO, and scraping together the resources to deal out the 200 I need to take Victini is pretty likely too. Now, my opponent, at least for a little while, seems content to fight it out. They drop the Pokemon Center Lady to heal up the Charizard a little bit, but I think eventually they realize, despite their massive hand, they just don't have the pieces they need to, you know, start steamrolling KOs again. So I think almost immediately after passing their turn, they scoop. Oh boy, that was a bit of a slog. You guys have no idea how much of a hit my rating took before I finally found a version of this deck that worked. And when I say worked, I mean just. Now, as far as theme decks go, this one was really frustrating, to be honest. Like, I see what they wanted to do with it, and, you know, don't get me wrong, Zeraora can be a fantastic card with the right support, but I feel like the designers in putting together this deck at least stopped short at the main combo, maybe fearing that it would be a little bit too much in a theme deck only environment, you know? But on the other hand, a bunch of draw supporters and pointless filler Pokemon, you know, you're overcompensating a little bit, right? Like, as far as theme decks go, this just doesn't cut it. And, you know, it's kind of baffling because I recently picked up a few theme decks from Lost Thunder and the sets preceding it, and you guys will hopefully see in the next couple episodes that a lot more thought was given into the lineup of the cards in those older decks. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not Battle Arena or League Battle decks, but you actually get some stable cards that would make the transition to the competitive scene at the time pretty fluid. You get a lot of ball search, you get cool things like escape rope and escape board. You get more than a pair of Switch. You know, some of them come with staples like Ultra Ball. It's kind of nuts. Professor Kukui, a great supporter, you know? But that's just not here. Like, this deck, nada. You get your standard best friend of the protagonist, draw 3 supporter. You get Looker, which draws 3 from the bottom of the deck. It's not enough to keep up with anything else. You know, you don't even really get that much recovery. You get the 2 Fishermen, but after you've blown up a few things with Zeraora, like, that's it. You know? So honestly, I can't recommend that you pick up this, theme deck. Certainly not for standard, but even for expanded. If I'm being completely honest, you can do a lot better. Now, I don't want to end on a negative note, so let me start by welcoming ArcG Gaming back to the world of sealed only. I was sad to see Leaf Peek Ron behind, my man, in your last episode, but hey, ADP is obviously a solid choice going forward, and I am hoping to see more sealed only goodness from you soon. In other fun news, fellow PokeTuber Professor's Research and I recently had a fantastic set of games, a few of which will be featured in the upcoming episode of Hoenn Legends. Think of it as the clash between sealed only and challenge mode and all the goodness associated with both of those things. And honestly, I promise you will not be disappointed. These were some fantastic games. Now, I think Prof will be featuring the battles in episode 5 or episode 6 of his series, so make sure to check out his episodes when they drop to get both sides of the battles. And I think that about wraps it up. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. This show continues to be a very welcome escape from everything going on in the world, and I hope it brings a little joy into your day, if only for like the 15-minute runtime of the episode at least. And with that, ladies and gents, I'll see you next time. Until then, take it easy.